A really good book I'm reading now, reviewing some basic concepts, is Field Geology by Frederic H. Lahee, PhD. The copyright date on this is 1961, so yes, it's old school. It's basically a field geology Bible, over 900 pages long. And the pages are really thin like a Bible too. I think that's funny. And I got this book because a lot of ideas that I see in geology, such as plate tectonics, I think are bogus. And I want to look at this and see where all the mistakes are being made. For the most part, a lot of this stuff is surface, but it does have a lot of good diagrams in here for how land formations move, for how things change and deposit over time. For instance, good diagrams like that, where it shows how salt moves up to the surface and the surrounding land falls around it, or contracts, I should say. And other kinds of formations where, mountains are formed, and different kinds of metamorphism, how different kinds of metamorphic rock change from pressure and time and weathering and that kind of thing. And it's just full of explanations here, and it's full of different diagrams which can bring the reader to understand that land is very, very complex. Look at that. Land is very, very complex. It's not just a big pile of rocks. It had to have been made that way via some sort of process. And in a theory I'm developing called stellar metamorphosis, the land is actually the last rocky or solid structure to have formed. And as you go deeper, you go further and further back in time. I guess a good analogy would be, like the astronomers, they look out through the telescopes, and the further and further they look, they're looking further and further back in time, because it takes light time to travel here. Well, this is different. If you have an object that was differentiated via inhomogeneous differentiation, meaning it forms its center first, and then it layers and layers and layers that center over many millions and billions of years, that means the deeper you go, the further back in time you go. But there's a caveat to that, because a lot of the material is fluid, so it would have mixed already and it wouldn't be true. But if you can go past that fluid and go to deep continental roots, you can find how the Earth really was at that point in time. As well, I noticed something here on Appendix 1 of this book. Now I know I've already, seen this before in a circular diagram, but you have your geologic time scale, how it's subdivided into eras, periods, epochs, ages, and phases. Okay? If you can see that, you have different times when these processes occurred, and you can pinpoint based off the layers in the land, just like in the Grand Canyon, of when those materials were deposited and what was happening at that specific point in time, because it's like a time capsule, if you will. The land acts as a time capsule. But since I see this, and I noticed, well, since they don't really have a formation theory of the Earth, they just try to explain it away with the nebula hypothesis, which is 18th century, rainy day nonsense. You have to actually figure out a way to put the Earth itself in a much grander time scale, because if the land goes back many billions of years, 3.5 billion years, all the way to the Archaeozoic age, if you will, I have to study more into that, then it means the central object inside the Earth's core, is actually vastly older than this geologic timescale that we're provided, because the geologists, they only can see the land itself, and they say, oh well, the Earth had to have always been a big rocky ball, so only the surface is the part that has aged, that we can tell the age of the Earth. See, they only look at it from the surface standpoint because that's all the information that is provided for them. But now that I'm developing a new theory on how to explain the entirety of the Earth, how the entire thing formed from an earlier stages of a gas giant, as well as the earlier stages of star evolution, when the star was much larger and bright like the sun, and there was no solid material to speak of, we can go all the way back then now, which means the geologic time scale is vastly richer and very, 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 very old. Much older than what geologists are being taught these days. Now, this guy, he was kind of a big deal. It says here, he was a consulting geologist since 1955, geological and research counselor of the Sun Oil Company, 1947 to 1955. From 1921 to 1947, he was a chief geologist of the Sun Oil Company, formerly assistant professor of geology, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So even the brightest of minds had missing geological timescales from their models and from their understanding of the Earth itself. Now, I'm not going to hold it against anybody because, you know, obviously technology has improved and it's allowed us to see things which have been previously unseen in the past. But my overall goal by reading this is to connect geology to a coherent theory of star evolution, being that currently geology is mutually exclusive of star evolution, in which case that means astronomers are ignoring reality. More on that later. Alright, today is June 7th, 2015. Hopefully people can read geological books like that. They're very good, and there's a lot of information to pull out of them. Alright, take it easy.